2025 was a big year for critical thinking and critical engagement, and that's extended to my own personal life. I've been trying hard to not just consume things, but rather let media, let art, let the work that other people create kind of be conduits or vessels through which I can understand more of myself, more of the world, more of what I think, etc., etc. And living my life that way has opened the doors for me to be much more affected and much more changed by what I've read and what I've watched and what I've listened to this year. And I think I've also changed my approach to it. I've always been someone who engages critically with things. I always like to, as I'm reading something, watching something, kind of analyze my thoughts, so kind of a sort of metacognition. But since I've kind of taken a step away from social media, I mean, I've deleted Instagram and TikTok on my phone, and I only use it for creating TikToks or creating Instagram posts or talking to people. I've been able to lately not just see critical engagement as the way that it's been framed in our dopamine-centered society, where it's not just, I need to have an opinion about everything. I need to either really love or really hate everything. And I think that that's something that's been prevailing lately because that's how the algorithm speaks. That's how the algorithm works, is that it has to push you to feel something. So either really negative or really positive. I have not been consuming things like that as of late, and I think that's allowing me to delve so much deeper in what it is that I love. So I don't have an exhaustive list. It's really just 5 really important pieces of media that have changed the way that I approach the world. Also, I'm doing this new thing, and this is after having taken a class that talked a lot about knowledge and thoughts and how we and our culture around knowledge and thoughts lately. And it's kind of giving me this philosophy of now I might start a thought and not finish it, in the sense that I now see the value in not needing to harness and extract and wring every possible sentiment that I have from an idea, every possible way of analyzing a particular idea. Sometimes an idea is most powerful when it kind of resides in its potential energy or when it just floats. So sometimes I might ask a question or I might say something and not necessarily finish it because I feel that the idea is self-contained or does not need further reflection, but is still interesting enough to just bring it up and have you find your own way to think about what I think. And I think that, I said I think 3 times, but I believe that it also creates an environment in this video that's conducive to deeper critical engagement. I don't want to have to spoon feed you what to think about how I've perceived all of this media. I think that just giving sometimes little nuggets and then letting you make what you want out of it can be much more impactful. So if you just see me say something or ask a question and then it just cuts to the next part and I haven't really elaborated on that, that's what it is. It's not accidental, it's intentional. And I even also invite you, like, if you have a way to finish, if you want to finish that thought, or if you had a thought about that thought, I invite you to share by going to the comment section. So the first one I'm going to start with, and you're going to see me reading out of this journal a lot because this is where I took all my notes while I was consuming these things, is Frankenstein. I have not finished the book yet, but I did watch the movie by Guillermo del Toro, and it was extraordinary. I know that the general or the central theme to the movie is kind of an exploration of parenthood, an exploration of fatherhood, and kind of trying to a different take on the parable of Jesus Christ. Kind of if Jesus Christ had things to say to his father being God, what that would look like. And I think that is so brilliant and amazing. But the thing that stuck with me the most wasn't this particular lens into the movie, but more so looking at it through the lens of hubris and the destructive capacity of human will and pushing human will to its fullest extent. Because I believe that Victor in the movie is mimicking the general tendency for humans to want to conquer everything, to want to conquer uncertainty, to want to progress forward and do more, and kind of quench this existential thirst that exists within us. And he does that by trying to conquer death. He doesn't really understand how his mother, died, even though his father was a doctor, etc., etc. And he's trying to get closer to that answer of, how can I beat death? How can I recontextualize my childhood trauma and find a way to win against it. You know, like, what if my mother hadn't died? What if I could have done something? How can I do that now? I really found Del Toro's take on death to be compelling, because I also watched Mickey 17, which has a take on death, but I found was so lukewarm. I didn't like Mickey 17 that much, but not on things that I didn't like, on things that I loved. Because in both movies, they kind of reanimate death. They give it life. They give it a voice. Not so literally in Mickey 17, because he was more so just coming back to life. So it's more so that there was something alive that could talk to others about death. But still, the way that Del Toro showed it is like, he shows that death kind of exists as a two-sided coin, one side being punishment and the other a form of absolution. Or rather, that we as human beings kind of hold both of those perceptions of death in tension, but we're wrong regardless, because it's this other third thing that is a lot more complex. But, you know, of course, there's also arguments to be made that what the creature represents isn't even death, but immortality, and what immortality would mean. So in some way it represents life, but less on the analysis side and more so how Frankenstein personally affected me. It was just seeing how all of these things come together. A big theme for me, I think, late 2025, which is when I consume a lot of these things, is what is authorship? What is artistry? How much can you push things? How big can it get? How intricate, you know, experience, work, effort, putting deep humanity within that. And Frankenstein took obviously a lot of years of work, because even I think Del Toro had conceptualized doing Frankenstein for years. He started, I think, he read the book and watched the movie when he was a preteen. I think he was 11. And he always kind of knew that this was something that he was going to bring forth. And the way that he approached the project and the way that it came to life, I think one thing that he said in an interview is that the movie was going to speak to him. So he didn't want to necessarily wind it down or capture it as something, as this rigid idea of how he conceptualized it before it was being made, which I think is so interesting, because I'm really different. I love control. I love, you know, planning. I love knowing, okay, this is where I'm going to do my project and this is where it's going to go and this is the time I'm going to do it, etc., etc. But he starts this, I mean, Goliath of a movie, and he goes, whatever happens within this movie is what it demands of us. So if the movie goes wrong in this way or requires this tweak, that is just the movie coming alive and telling us, you know, what it wants to be. And I think I found approaching art in that way, with a lot more freedom, with a lot more fluidity, kind of seeing art not as this thing that you are making, but this thing that is coming out of you and talking to you in response. Kind of like this, not on a Roborose, but you get what I'm saying? This imagery of, like, you know, circularly you bring the art to light, but then the light kind of informs you back, and then it keeps going like this. I think that was really interesting. And just generally meticulous detail for the sake of detail, and especially in a time where we have AI and we have incredibly, like, we have to churn out all of this shit for the production cycle, and we have to make, do. The level of, I would say, but in an endearing way, unnecessary detail that not only Del Toro, but his entire team brought into the movie was incredibly inspiring. So the costume designer, how she added little, because obviously Elizabeth, she's really interested in, you know, little bugs and little pieces of nature that people overlook. And a lot of her dresses were in this motif of like malachite and moth patterns and stuff like that. And to me, it was like, this is what it means not only to be an artist, but to be human in a world where human endeavor, human effort, human passion, human creation linked deeply to humanity is getting more and more effaced. And I think an interesting thing to consider is this going to be the bar? Like, in a world where we're going to have AI more and more incorporated, and it's kind of a sort of propaganda machine that I've been noticing, that people are trying to tell us that this is normal, that stuff is now going to have AI because it's just, you know, the advent of technology and creative destruction. But it's like, maybe not. No, thank you. Whatever. I wonder if this is just going to be the kind of standard that's going to be set for art nowadays, in a way that you can't just replicate it through something like AI. Another thing that I really loved about the movie is the use of red. So, oh my god, this is kind of tangential, but sometimes I like to do media analysis, obviously, and sometimes I'll feel like I'm off the mark, but then I'll watch interviews and they'll reaffirm exactly what I perceived in the piece of media, and the level of goon that I get from that is unbelievable. The level of validation is just so good. So on that, I noticed that there was the use of red in a really interesting way, where in the first part, so the Victor's Tale part of the movie, kind of leading up to, but mostly before he makes the creature, there is a lot of red on him. So obviously you have the red that's shown in a very obvious way at the beginning with his mom, and oh my god, this is when I knew I was gonna love the movie, was the way the veil moved, the symmetry of the shots, the crispness of the shots, the fact that there were pretty much no close shots. It was more like mid shots and like wide angle shots. So you have that red, and you're like, okay, red is the mom, and then you have, okay, red is death, because you have that angel of death, and you have the blood of the mother that's all over his white, I believe it was white clothes, to symbolize that she was basically gonna die, and then tying all those together, that the mom, the grief, the death, as he grows older, like adult Victor, and you see his journey as he's making the creature, he always has a piece of red on him in his pursuit of, like I said, conquering death. And I guess that's supposed to tie it back to his mom, and like a lot of him is it's again him trying to recontextualize his trauma and recontextualize the death of his mother in a way that he can be like, I beat this thing finally. And also the angel of death that kind of put him on this quest or whatever. And then also really interestingly, when Elizabeth, who looks exactly like the mom because they both play by Mia Goth, when Elizabeth is in the scene with Victor, he usually isn't wearing any red. So it's that externalization of, you know, his mother and all of his wants and all of the kind of grief and everything that's tied into that projected onto Elizabeth. And not only that idea, because again, it was confirmed. Basically, I watched an interview and he kind of hinted to, yeah, there was this use of red that he did in a really particular and intentional way. Not just the fact that it was in there, but just, I don't know, the choice of it, the choice to do that. It's unnecessary, but it's there, and I loved that. I loved that level of commitment, and I think that's a recurring pattern in a lot of the movies and music, as I'll say, that I really enjoyed this year, is just committing entirely. I loved Sinners so much. When I first watched it, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't dislike it. I was just like, okay, this is a really good movie, but I don't know, there's something missing. And I think the something missing was, again, this diving more deeply into it, because a big reason why I got this journal that I use for all my notes when I'm consuming media is realizing that a big part of how I enjoy things and am able to fall deeply in love with things in a way that they can actually affect me, and how I move about my life, is to be able to understand the artistic choices, the ethos of it, that kind of stuff, all of it. And that was the part that was missing, because once I delved more deeply into Sinners, watched it a second time, thought about all of the amazing narrative, cinematographic, musical choices that were made to kind of bring this story together, it was incredible. I'm actually gonna use my computer for this one because I took notes on Sinners before I had this small journal. So it's a bit like Frankenstein, where there's this more obvious theme, I suppose, of the movie, but I found another theme more compelling. So the obvious theme was, I think people kept talking about cultural appropriation. The theme that I got was kind of cultural appropriation, but it was more so cultural assimilation through religious indoctrination. I mean, first of all, it's called Sinners, so yeah. And then obviously you start in the church, and pretty much the movie, apart from the epilogue, ends with the church. And you have, even the vampires, you have Sammy being the soul of Black culture with his ability to kind of bring all of the generation, past and future, together. And then Remick wanting to steal that and make it part of his fellowship. They kept talking about fellowship and love, and they're all this hive mind, you know what I mean? And how the vampires had this sentiment that they wanted to save them from themselves, if that makes sense, so that they can join a larger community and feel true love, the love of the community that's all together, this hive mind that's a higher order of existence, because you're with all these people and you kind of feel this kind of an implied spiritual ascension once you're connected to everyone in this quote-unquote fellowship. And there are specific mentions in the movie, as I recall. Well, I know that there are, but I recall only one really specific one, which is when they went to go see Slim, the one who plays harmonica, and he talked really particularly about Black people and their relationship to religion and how it came to us and how we now use it, etc., etc. And also, from the first shot of the movie to the last one, there's a tension with Sammy where it's, either the guitar, so his soul, his connection to Black culture, his connection to Blackness, and the preacher, his father, so his choice to let that go for God and all that stuff. There's that entire tense relationship that kind of haunts the narrative throughout the whole movie. And what really brought it home, where I was like, okay, I'm not going to listen to any of the gaslighting. I know that there is a religious assimilation arc to this, was when towards the end of the movie there was it Smoke, let me check, it was Smoke and the clan member. So there was kind of a shot, okay, look at Smoke, okay, look at the clan member, and then after that there was a shot of, okay, look at Sammy, look at the preacher. So a bit of a reset. My memory ran out in my SD card, and through the whole uploading, deleting, etc. process that was going on in the background, I decided to also take a shower and do my nighttime routine, since it was going to take 45 minutes for me to be able to use my memory card again, and I had time to kill. Anyways, I think I was talking about I was talking about Smoke in that ending scene with the whole battle with the clan members that had arrived, and the juxtaposition of that and going back and forth between Sammy and his father. Now, do I think that Ryan Coogler was saying that the church is the Ku Klux Klan? No, I don't think so, not necessarily. But he was bringing forward attention that I think exists in a lot of Black people, whether they're religious or not, which is, of course, the church has done a lot in the community, particularly had a big place in the civil rights movement. I mean, Martin Luther King was Christian, and the Black church did a lot to uplift people and a lot to bring people together, and kind of existed as a stronghold of a lot of ghetto communities. And of course, there's gospel choir and how a lot of our culture emerged from, the Black church. But at the same time, the fact that there's a tension there where, how did this religion come to us? It wasn't ours. It was kind of forced upon us in the way that it was used against us, et cetera, and used against other peoples, like the indigenous, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, there was the epilogue where they came back after being, turned vampires, Mary and Stack. And they're like, well, we're doing great, and if you come with us, you'll have eternal life, that kind of mirroring. And Remick saying, I think he said long ago, the men who stole my father's land forced these words upon us. I hated those men, but the words still bring me comfort. When, I don't remember who it was, but someone was invoking Christian passages from the Bible, or someone was invoking passages from the Bible to rebuke him, quote unquote, and it wasn't working because Remick had a connection to that in the past. I'm talking about, again, Irish persecution of religion by the British Empire, I think it was at the time. And then also, just speaking of Remick, I love this scene so much, what's it called, the Rocky Road to Dublin scene where they were all dancing in a circle. I rewatched and re-listened to that song an insane amount, and it also changed me because I started listening to Irish folk music since then. And that song, the Rocky Road to Dublin, is a song about leaving one's town to flee religious persecution. I bring all those things up because Sinners is quite radical in the ideas that it brings forth. I saw this interview with Ryan Coogler, and this interviewer was talking about another theme within it that was radical in a different way. So not in terms of proselytization, but more so how the movie related to capitalism. And Ryan Coogler in that interview, oh my God, he was so uncomfortable. It was cringy. I felt like I was gonna crawl out of my body, how uncomfortable he was and how odd it was to watch, because the interviewer was making great points about how it was related to capitalism and a critique of capitalism, and how it was kind of Marxist in its narrative and in the things that it implied. But then Ryan Coogler was like, where's my publicist? And it made me think about, what does it mean to create things, not even just art, but just to have these products, to have these things that you make that are radical and challenge or rattle status quo in a world where the companies, whether production companies or just companies in general, who are funding your project benefit very heavily from status quo. So yeah, it was very heavily implied in the interview that by Ryan Coogler, that's like, you're talking about capitalism and radicalism and you're gonna get me fucking blacklisted. I cannot say anything. But it was interesting, but also very uncomfortable to watch. It also was really impactful for me because of the music in Sinners. Oh my gosh, the music in Sinners. It made me realize that I actually wanted to maybe one day create a score for film. I want to make something as well done musically, so a composition that is so rich and researched and well themed. It was just Ludwig Göransson, just, oh my god, his scores are just like amazing. And I've been listening to not the album of Sinners, but there's the one where it's all the songs. So Pale Pale Moon, Rocky Road to Dublin, I think Take Me, and all of those songs. I haven't listened to that one. I've been listening to the one that's just the like background tracks, so just the ones that don't really have that many words. For instance, the song that plays in the background when Smoke goes to see Annie in the shack, that kind of stuff. Just getting really into blues, because I was very anti-blues. I connected a lot more with blues, understanding the history, understanding the complexity of it. Ludwig Göransson weaved the themes of the movie, so lineage of blackness, the lineage of music, particularly black music, and obviously the horror element of it. And he took blues and then would add these moments of rock. And it really got me generally interested in music, sound, and movies, and appreciating that part of a film more. And I even made a playlist of parts of like cues that I loved from movies. And now I'm also much more interested in the history of music genres, the history of music instruments, and how it's evolved to the music that we have now. A through line that goes from Frankenstein and Sinners and then on to Lux, which is what I'm going to talk about in a moment, is also just how these creators, like, the things that you make are so dependent on your tastes. And I don't even mean it in the obvious way. Like, obviously you make what you like, you make what you're interested in, right? But I more so mean that the kind of world that these people crafted are so heavily informed by their past experiences and the past things that they've consumed, all the media that they've read and watched and listened to, and how they perceived it and how they have synthesized all of it to make something of their own. It makes sense, right, that what you make depends on, what you eat of the world and how you eat it. Like, if I want to use that analogy to its fullest extent, if you're a chef, you have to know what umami tastes like to be able to create a recipe. And it goes into, like, not consuming passively and consuming more deeply, and taking notes on what you watch and listen, and seeing how you can really delve yourself more deeply into what artists make instead of just, listening to it in the background, whatever. Because if you're, again, a chef and you're sitting down and you're eating a meal and you're not thinking, okay, this is sweet and sour, which is what makes it really interesting, and it also kind of, there's a pop of lemon here, and this is what makes it, more fresh, whatever. If you can't do that, if you can't really sit with what you're eating day to day, or even week to week, or even just have that skill of being able to do it when you want to do it, you're not going to be able to make your own shit later, because you're not going to know what taste to add, you're not going to know what does what. It's going to be much more difficult. So it's just inspired me to be more picky and intentional with what I consume, because that is going to dictate what I'm able to make. So Lux was an axis shift. Lux was a world-tilting experience for me. Genuinely, I remember it was 1 a.m., I think, and I just saw, the album is out, might as well listen to it. I was not half asleep, but I was I was actually quite awakened once. I was kind of awake when I finally had listened to it, but I was about to go to sleep. I said not to. I decided to listen to the album instead. It was in the dark. I was just, so I had to immerse myself. I had to, just sit and listen to it in its entirety. And, I was also looking at the translations at the same time, and because she speaks in 13 different languages in this album. And I remember right after I ended it, I was like, what the flippity fuck? It was almost annoying. The album is so good, it was almost annoying. It was almost defeating in how extraordinary it is, because it's one of those things where you see someone make it and you think to yourself, I'm a loser. I've never had an impressive thought. I've never made a good thing ever in my life. I am never going to be this, so what is the point? And I know that that's not all the sentiment that Rosalia was trying to impart with her album, like quite the opposite. But it was insane. But at the same time as that kind of background sentiment was in my mind of, I need to, because it was quickly shifted in my head. It wasn't just, oh, I didn't even know it was possible for a human being to make this. How am I supposed to measure up? It was quickly shifted to, okay, I need to get on that ground. I need to get on that Rosalia, whatever she took, whatever she did. I need to figure out that sauce within my own, within my own world, and translate it and be able to make stuff like this. But what was really interesting was, I looked at not only the album and the lyrics and the symbolism, etc., but also the visuals, and just seeing, what she was teasing, the promo kind of around the album. And it came at the perfect time, because prior to that, during my first semester of university, there was this sentiment that I had that there was something wrong. There was something wrong there was just something off, and I always felt off, as if there was this kind of missing picture in my life. And I thought to myself, what is it? And it took a bit of a toll. And then I think literally 2 days before I listened to Lux, my best friend, I called her and I was talking to her about it, and she told me how, I see this as such a negative thing, that I feel like I'm on, not the precipice, but I feel that there's a little, how could I say, a little smidge in the picture of my life, or in the picture of my future and my present. And I see that as this, existential threat. But why is it not exciting? Why is it not, oh, I'm not sure what's changing, I'm not sure what's going on, maybe there's more to find about myself. Maybe this is I should be grateful that I get to figure out what it is that I want more of in life. And then 2 days later, boom, Lux, boom, this album who could only have been made with such a deep dedication to self-authorship, to identity, to authenticity, this deep knowing of yourself, this deep trust of yourself, and this deep delving into all that you are, and digging it up, and then putting it together in such a skillful way, and then presenting it to the world. And it got me, after listening to the album, I got so excited about life again. I got so excited about, I'm gonna have all these experiences, and I'm gonna see all these things, and meet all these people, and watch all these movies, and listen to all this music, and read all these books, and then I'll be able to kind of bring more of me into the world, and hone in who I am, and make decisions, and lose myself in projects that are gonna inform what I become. And this constant becoming and unbecoming, and connecting and disconnecting, is such a beautiful life experience. And I don't know, the album is just such a deeply feeling ode to oneself. So I think an ode to Rosalia herself as she was writing the album, and an ode to the world, and an ode to higher power, particularly in her instance, God in a Catholic sense. That, I don't know, it was just undeniable the way that it reinvigorated something within me. It's to the extent that, honestly, I'm going to make an entire video dedicated just to the Lux album. I think I have so much to say about the themes of the album, and what it means, and how it was made, and how I felt about it at every, moment, and every artistic choice. That it has to be its own video. The contemplation of art and creation, and selfhood, and making things, and all that comes into making things, has been a big theme for me in 2025. And Rosalie in particular really helped me see art and selfhood as a language, as a manner of speaking. And I wrote it down, and it's like, for instance, I also speak French in addition to English. And if you speak one language, you'll understand where there are some words and languages that have no translation in English. So a random example, it's always the example that I use because it's something that genuinely comes up more than you think. People, every time I use this example, English speakers are like, there's no way this is ever useful or ever important, but I swear it is. And it's the word in French, dédaigneux, which the English translation, there's no word for it, but the English way to say it would be, when you don't like sharing things with your mouth. So when, like, for example, if I took a bite of a cake and then I give you that same spoon that I took a bite with, you don't want that because I have my mouth on it. So if you don't like that, we call it dédaigneux, whatever. All that to say that languages have these gaps, and there are these things that just are at the tip of your tongue that you cannot express. And art is that kind of itch, that impulse, the thing that's kind of, that you're trying to say. I mean, when I was watching them speak about, the things that they make, there's just so much that goes into it. I mean, obviously, but there's just so much that goes into it. And that's another thing that I started thinking about is I keep saying, Rosalia and Del Toro and Kugler, but there's these teams of people around them that came together and made all of these things, and kind of like a collaborative language, like a sort of a tapestry, kind of, I don't know, maybe in some ways art is a dream. Art is our dreams. Art is, what we pull out of our non-conscious as a society, is what we're like, this common thing that we feel as human beings that we can all kind of understand without understanding, this language that's universal. People who dedicate themselves to speaking it well, to being articulate in it, the effort is just, I don't know, it's just insane. And going back to the idea of taste and it kind of guiding you to the thing that you want to create, and it being so specific to you, etc., etc. It was so interesting watching these artists talk about what it is that has informed them. So Del Toro talking about all the books that he had read, obviously way before he even was making Frankenstein, but like the books that he thought he was pulling from. And then in that awkward interview, which was still kind of good, Ryan Coogler was talking about all these other vampire movies that he'd watched and how that helped him make his own kind of form of vampirism and his own commentary, even though he didn't say it, about capitalism and about blackness and about all of these things. These feelings that are core to who we are as people get repeated and recommunicated, not in a bad way. I just mean, again, they just come to light over and over and over again, and you see how different people will amalgamate all that they've learned about humanity and about themselves in very different ways. The core of what I'm trying to say is that we all want to talk to each other. We want to say something to each other. And of course, we fail to, because there's so much division in society, because we're on different camps of, identity or feeling or opinion, and especially now with algorithmic, the algorithmic partition of, society of like into these particular echo chambers. I know echo chambers is such a redundant word that people say a lot, but still it's true. These echo chambers, and how it's hard to see each other, but we still all want to speak to, almost like ask each other, hey, do you feel this too? Like, do you see this too? Like, do you also get do you get what I'm saying? Have you felt this? Have you gone through this? Do you see me? Can I see you? And I think that's what art is. It's trying to sit down with everyone and, have people buy tickets to your movie or have people stream your album, and checking in on if everyone is feeling what it is that you feel. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. And then there was this, on feeling actually, that was a really good segue. There was a tincture poem. Well, it's called Tincture Poem, basically. Or is it just called Tincture? Ooh, I should have. Let me check that. Okay, sorry. The Tincture Poem, or the poem Tincture by Andrea Gibson. which was featured in a video that I watched. I don't remember the YouTube creator, which is so humiliating because I watch her so much and I love her content. But it is a poem on feeling and sensuality. It talks about basically, when I'm dead, my soul is going to miss everything that I took for granted in life as a feeling body. So just reading a couple passages. Imagine when a human dies, the soul misses the body, actually grieves the loss of its hands and all they could hold, misses the third closing shy reading out loud on the first day of school. Imagine the soul misses the stubbed toe, the loose tooth, the funny bone. The soul still asks, why does the funny bone do that? It's just weird. Imagine the soul misses the thirsty garden cheeks, watered by grief, etc., etc. I want to read the whole poem because I don't know copyright and stuff and I don't want to get in trouble, but it reawakened me to realize just how numb we go about the world lately. Again, on this, passive consumption and not getting deep into things and just watching a movie just for the sake of watching it or putting something in the background, or just going through the motions of life, like just walking, for example, to my class and not feeling the wind on my face, not feeling how warm my feet are in my winter boots, all of those things, and just A to B, A to B, A to B, that kind of culture that is getting worse and worse and worse, I feel. It just made me realize that I am missing out on so much, that I should be grateful that I get to, smell and taste and see. And there are so many little micro sensory things that are going on that I'm never aware of because I don't just let myself be. And it's made me practice more not listening to music sometimes when I'm taking a walk and just listening to the sounds around me, the sounds of the world. Not necessarily just putting something in the background for the sake of it. Also just generally the practice of, in the case of the other things that I've, watched and seen and consumed, whatever, to go more deeply into that, to just feel a lot more, because I'm not doing myself any favors by holding back all that life has to give me when it comes to the sensual dimension of existing. There's so much that disconnects us from the deep experience of life. And I don't know, it's really disheartening. Yeah. Actually, what really ties this, I think, all together is the final piece of media that this one truly, I mean, all of those, like I said, in the ways that they've informed my perspective and changed me, but this one, if I had to pick one thing in 2025 that absolutely re-altered the way that I perceive people and life and society and culture and everything all the time, it is having read The Dialectic of Enlightenment by Adorno, or just in general. I had a class which ended up being not at all what I expected it to be. It was a class on conspiracies and new religious movements, but really it was a class on thinking, and a class on alienation and isolation and capitalism, and all the factors that kind of lead to conspiratorial thinking, kind of lead to like these microcosms that echo themselves, or that become more and more dangerous, and that become kind of extremist. All of the things that inform that, and part of it was our exploration in the lecture of Dialectic of Enlightenment. It ties into the numbness and isolation, because the Dialectic of Enlightenment, first of all, I do not recommend you read it. I think the reason why I was able to enjoy it so much was because of my amazing professor and how he explained it in lecture and how it tied into everything else that we read. And of course, in general, I think that class specifically has changed me in many ways. But if I were to take the one thing that's kind of the apex, or the culmination point, the climax of that class, it was a Dialectic of Enlightenment. It's by Adorno and Horkheimer, and they talk about how as we've moved to a more, not just even secular, but scientifically advanced society, or just modern society, we went through this phase of, okay, we have, folkloric, mythic gods, and like totemism, stuff like that, whatever, barbarism, whatever. And then we go into kind of mystifying it in a different way, using magic, mythology, kind of like the sea isn't just the sea controlled by Poseidon type of thing. And so we abstracted concepts in that way. So we needed to understand how the sea worked. We needed something to bargain with. And so for that reason, we made gods, or we, talked to gods that had domains over certain things. So, if you're a farmer and your livelihood depends on agriculture, you want to be able to remove the uncertainty of your crops just dying all of a sudden in a way that you cannot explain or cannot control. So who do you talk to? You talk to Demeter. No, it's not Demeter that's agriculture. Demeter is generally nature. But Demeter's son, I think, is agriculture. You talk to that guy. Yeah, right? And then after that, when the world had gotten more secular, we turned to science. And not only science, but a scientific culture that limits thinking and being and humanness, and really prioritizes use. Knowing things for the sake of using it, making things for the sake of using it. So in demystifying the world so they can be less scary, so you can understand it more, so that when you're a farmer, you don't have to worry about, my crops there could be a drought, I could have no more crops. First you did the thing where you bargained with a god, and now we do the thing where, that the rain is made this way, and so you need to farm in these areas, and you also have irrigation, and you have tractors, and you have pesticides, and you have fertilizer. And so trying to abstract the world. Abstraction, explained simply, is just taking the essence of the world and making it less connected to its essence. So explaining it more and more. So, in a more visual way, if you're a visual person, this is the world in its true essence that's always going to be unknown to us to some degree. Sorry, I keep flipping around my voice recording. That's kind of ugly. Anyways, stripping away the kind of in the Hindu sense, I think is a good way to explain it, and putting it one level up and one level up and one level up, deep into just instrumental understanding and instrumental reason, instrumental knowledge. So water isn't just water. It's, the tides pulled by the moon, and it has atoms and H2O, and it's in this and this and this and this and this. And pulling away from what it truly is, the experience, the feeling, the whatever, the very magical essence, the ineffable essence of things. And I'm now understanding that in the dialectic of enlightenment, because it says it's called the dialectic of enlightenment because that project of making things more and more abstract is called the Enlightenment, partially because of that kind of scientific period in the 1800s, I believe, where people were more focused on, thinking and reasoning and science, and less on just delegating everything to, it's God, Catholic Church, what do you have to say about this? But also just generally trying to shed a light on everything, right? Enlightenment. All of that has to do with numbing and division and the block of being able to feel as a human being, to be sensual, in the way that Andrea Gibson was talking about, that we take advantage of, to create art in a more unfettered sense, to have more of these kind of, not out of body, but deeply connected, deep connectedness to the things that we consume, because we're just consuming so much because of abstraction, because we are made to feel less and less human and more part of the rhythm at which society works. And that rhythm usually works so that we are in some way serving a capitalist system. If it's not about doing things, learning things, knowing things for the sake of using them later, for a capitalist, for a company, for money, for labor, for the sake of labor, then there's no point in the Enlightenment age, as Adorno would put it. And so it is through that lens that I kind of analyze Frankenstein, how he was trying to conquer again death, how to make it something he can use, to make it something that he could discipline when he was hitting him with the iron thing, and a bunch of other examples. And that is what I'm actively working against in going deep into the things that I consume. I need to find a synonym for consume. It's getting redundant. And now, having looked back on everything I loved in 2025, I think that is why so much of the media that I fell in love with is about feeling deeply, being deeply, doing deeply. And my hopes, I do have a couple of media hopes for 2026. I want to keep bringing this belief, this philosophy of life, this anti-enlightenment philosophy of life into 2026, and keep doing things not just for the sake of the capitalistic rhythm of the world or for the sake of using it or without deep attention to it and deep enjoyment of it. Also, I want to read more magazines. I have magazines that I bought from a couple different places, and I looked at the pictures. I'm a child. I looked at the pictures. I didn't read the words. I just, oh, pretty, nice, and I closed it. But I do want to read the words. I want to watch more interviews in 2026. I want to read more books in 2026. I want to watch more short films. There was other stuff that I wanted to watch. Oh, and that's the thing, and I really want to look at fashion shows. There's this new creator on YouTube that I've been really loving, and they're kind of a fashion anthropologist, a consumerism anthropologist, I would say. And I really love how, I don't know why I said they, her pronouns are she, her, I'm pretty sure, but the way she articulates fashion, the way she articulates not just fashion, but like clothes and clothes that are being sold and fashion companies is so amazing. And I have forgotten for some reason how much clothes and runway shows and what's new in fashion and what's being sold right now, in whether it be fast fashion or higher luxury brands, but she talks more usually about niche and luxury brands, what they say about the state of our world. I think those are really insightful, and I would really love to consume more of that. I also want to make more and not only ever be someone who's receiving art, like, I don't want to say consuming it again, but consuming it. Yeah. I want to be able to produce something from all that I learn, and just as a way to have a conduit of some sorts, And also, lastly, I want to be able to consume more media of different languages. So I've started watching YouTubers who speak Spanish and who speak French, because French is my mother tongue, but I realized never, ever, ever in my teenagehood, but since I've been, when I was a child, of course I would watch a lot of things in French, but since then I don't watch anything in French ever, unless there's a gun to my head. Maybe more things in Creole, because another thing, I want to be able to learn more from sources that aren't just, developed countries. But yeah, I encourage you to think more, watch TikTok less. No, I'm not antagonistic in that way. Do what you want. I wish you a 2026 full of life-changing art, life-changing books, movies, music, everything. I hope that you lose yourself in it and you have a fucking blast. And thank you for watching.